I would be worried. But if a team out there is like, we don't care, here, take money, go for it.
We for years, I feel like, I think I wrote something on Forbes like back in 2019 about like how teams already needed to start preparing for the 2021 free agent class because it was going to be that loaded. We have Giannis, we have Kawhi, we have Paul George, Rudy Gobert, Drew Holiday, like all, Jason Tatum, Bam Adebayo, all of these, Donovan Mitchell, like all these guys. Most of them have signed extensions at this point. So like the top of the free agent class has been picked over, almost barren now. The two big names left, one of whom at the time of recording we don't even know if he's going to be a free agent. The one we do, actually I guess we don't know either one of these guys are going to be free agents. They both have player options, but we're assuming they will both decline the player options to become free agents. Kawhi Leonard with the Clippers suffers the partial ACL tear, misses the final 8 games of the playoffs for the Clippers. We don't know what his status is for next year. He's going to miss some time, if not the entire season. If you're Kawhi, again, by the time you guys are listening to this, he will have made this decision, but we don't know what he's going to do right now. So if you're Kawhi, do you even consider picking up the player option, or do you decline it and say, someone's got to give me a longer term deal here?
Oh man, I mean, that's the big thing, right? So the NBA teams are, as I get it, more open-minded to giving big-time superstars guaranteed money despite previous injuries. So based on that, history, I would say that Kawhi, for his own interest, should just go into free agency and let someone give him a 3 to 4 year contract, whatever he wants and whatever is offered to him at the max. But no, I mean, I'm the cautious type personally on occasion. So I will personally say that if I was in that situation, I would take the money and just lock myself up on that 1 year deal to make sure, because I just don't know what my future holds. That's a rough injury. We don't even know if he's going to play next year. I would be worried, but if a team out there is like, we don't care, here, take money, go for it.
Yeah. I promise you, if Kevin Durant gets a 4-year max deal coming off of a fully torn Achilles, Kawhi Leonard is getting a 4 or 5 year max coming off of a partially torn ACL. I hear you about wanting to lock in. I think it's like a $36 million player option, but I would rather lock in $150 million or like $200 million if I'm staying with the Clippers. So I think he does opt out. There have been no rumblings whatsoever that he is seriously entertaining leaving the Clippers. But, there are teams out there. Our friend Keith Smith tweeted out updated cap space projections after the draft. The Knicks lead the way with $53.5 million. Dallas can get up to 34.3. Pelicans can get to about 36. Those are really the 3 big ones that can get to max room. Miami could maybe do some finagling to get a little bit more. I don't think they could get a max. OKC is up there as well, but I don't think Kawhi is going to OKC. But the Knicks and the Mavericks. If you're the Clippers, I think the Knicks and the Mavericks are the 2 teams that you have to worry about here. You have to say, if we aren't going to give Kawhi a full 5-year max, those teams are at least going to be willing to do the full 4. So if you're the Clippers, do you just give Kawhi whatever he wants, whether it's a full 5-year max, whether he wants a 2+1, 1+1, whatever the case may be? Do you say, okay, yeah, you write the contract, we'll just sign it?
I think you might have to. I wouldn't love it. I wouldn't feel as though it's something I would feel secure about moving forward, at least not that first year. I mean, hell, when the Nets signed KD to that deal, you and I did multiple podcasts where we brought up the Nets, and I was like, guess we'll find out. Fortunately, KD came back in perfect form and was the KD of old, which is great. But there would always be that hesitancy in the back of my mind. But yeah, I think it's Kawhi Leonard. I mean, when he's healthy, he's at worst a top 5 player in the NBA, if not a top 3, really. So I think you might just have to take a bite out of the sour apple and do it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, they have no way to replace, if Kawhi Leonard leaves, they have no way to replace a talent like him. Like, the Clippers absolutely have to just cave to whatever he wants here. And as we discussed in the last episode, I think they've done well in the meantime with the draft, to get some talent in, and Keon Johnson, especially Brandon Boston, some young guys in there who can stretch their wings a little bit until Kawhi returns. Chris Paul is the other big one. We talked about him after the finals with our friend Gerald Bourget. God, I always mess up his last name. Bourget. We talked about him and, whether he is going to decline. He has a $44.2 million player option, whether he's going to decline that, whether he's going to stay with the Suns, whether the Suns are going to be willing to offer him what he wants. Eric Pincus of Bleacher Report has reported multiple times now that he is eyeing a 3-year, $100 million deal. And there were some comments from Bob Sarver the other day, who is a notoriously frugal owner of the Phoenix Suns, that at least made you raise your eyebrow and say, are they willing to offer him the 3-year, $100 million deal? So how do you see CP3's situation playing out?
I mean, they made the finals. We've talked about this before. This is the furthest that he's ever gone as well. It seems like he loves his teammates. There's a special bond with Monty Williams on the bench. I think it's a question of him just telling that organization, here's what I want, make it happen. And if Robert Sarver responds to that by not doing what CP wants, then he's going to be public enemy number 1 in Phoenix, which I don't think he wants to be after a finals run where the fan base has, at least for the moment, just backed off of him a little bit, and instead he's seeing celebration as opposed to vitriol coming his way. So if he knows what's good for his his reputation moving forward, I think it would behoove him to just do the same thing with the Clippers and Kawhi Leonard, and just basically say, you know what, Chris, let's figure out what you want. Is it 3 years, 100? Sure. Why not? Let's go for it.
Right. Just, again, write your own contract. We'll sign it. Yeah, I mean, because, again, much like the Clippers with Kawhi, the Suns have to be sitting there thinking, okay, the Knicks have $50 million plus in cap space and they need a point guard. They have made no bones about they're going hunting for a point guard this offseason. They'll have plenty of point guards to choose from, which we'll get to in a minute. But CP3 is at the top of that market, and seeing what he did with the Suns this past season, I'm sure the Knicks and the Pelicans too. The Pelicans carve out all that cap space with the trade they did on Monday, sending Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe to the Grizzlies. Now they can get up to $36 million. The Pelicans, who are under enormous pressure to make some serious strides this upcoming season, because Zion Williamson, some of the members of his family, are apparently unhappy, according to the people with The Athletic. So they are, they're accelerating their timetable, and it's seeing what Chris Paul did with the Suns. You're telling me a Knicks team that makes the playoffs for the first time in 7 or 8 years, they're not looking at Chris Paul as like, oh, well, if he can do that with Phoenix, why can't he do that with us? Or the Pelicans, they're with Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson. No, well, we've got plenty of talent. We just need that veteran leader to push us forward. So, CP3 is going to have a market if the Suns are not willing to meet his asking price. But like you, I think, I just can't imagine, unless they just completely, 3 years, $45 million, take it or leave it, just completely lowball him. Coming off of that.
Why would they?
Right. And coming off of the finals round, if it didn't pan out how it did, if they flamed out, let's say they were the number 2 seed and the Lakers beat them in the first round, then I could maybe see, okay, we're a little nervous about giving you whatever you want, but they made the finals. They were up 2-0 in the finals. There's no way they can let Chris Paul leave. The back half of that contract might be horrific, and that is just a price that you have to pay because of what he meant to your team this year, and developmentally what he has meant for Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, who has routinely sung his praises as being one of the most influential presences in his career.
Yeah. No, I agree, but at the same time, I just want to have this conversation. I also think it's important not to necessarily pay for past performances.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is if you are looking at this as a jumping off point and you're fully expecting to return to the finals, sure. But like if the Suns are going to top out as a round 1 or round 2 team moving forward, then of course I would understand some level of hesitancy. But as you alluded to in the podcast we did last time, the West is more or less wide open, which means that there is incentive for the Suns to actually say we can return to the finals as we did this year. We can get back there, but we will need to have the proper engine to do so, and that means that we just can't let CP3 slip out of our fingers. So just because of the happenstance around that situation, I think you just have no choice. But let the record reflect that I think it is dangerous to go into contract negotiations if your entire mindset is, well, this guy did that for us in the past, so let's keep paying him for something. I mean, that burned the Lakers for years with Kobe, for example. Mm-hmm. And I get it. Those were legacy contracts. I understand. But at the same time, it's just like you're sitting there going, that's a lot of money for someone who, in Kobe's instant, had a torn Achilles, could not really play at the level he was used to, and you were paying him as an All-NBA player. So I think you need to find common ground from both sides. Like Chris Paul also needs to recognize he's not 25 anymore. So if he comes in and says, I want something completely outrageous, no, you have to find some level of ground that makes sense for both sides.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about the West, because you look, again, we talked about the Lakers a lot last episode, so I don't want to go too far into that, but they are a giant question mark until they round out their roster. The Clippers, regardless of whether they keep Kawhi or not, if he misses most of next season or all of next season, you can't reasonably pencil them in as championship favorites. We'll also see what happens with their supporting cast, particularly Reggie Jackson, who we'll get to in a bit. The Nuggets, Jamal Murray is going to miss most of the season. We don't know what he's going to look like next year. So, Utah, we saw how they flamed out. They're already starting to, they salary dumped Derek Favors. We'll see if they can keep Mike Conley. Like, all of these top other potential contenders have major question marks that Phoenix really doesn't. It's like if you keep Chris Paul, we'll talk about Cameron Payne shortly too, but otherwise, you maybe need to find a backup point guard and a backup center in free agency. But otherwise, you're feeling pretty good about, your starting five is locked in place. Compared to, the other top teams in the West, you got to feel pretty good about where you are. And you're not going to have what they did early this past season where, it took Devin Booker and Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton, honestly, to figure out their offensive hierarchy. Now they got it. Now they can just hit the ground running next season. So I think if the Suns do keep Chris Paul, they're likely the best team in the West next year, and that should be further incentive to, as you said, reach common ground.
Pending, of course, something crazy going down over the course of the next month. Yes.
Right.